All right, so you're ready to build your own AI, huh? That's awesome. But let's be real, cracking open those programming textbooks sometimes feels like you're trying to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Yeah, it can be a bit daunting.
It really can. Don't worry, we've got your back. We're going on a deep dive today into Progress2.pdf to unearth the coding knowledge you actually need,
Mm.
like what's actually important to get you going.
It's about finding those golden nuggets of wisdom, right? Separating the signal from the noise.
Mhm.
We want to accelerate your coding journey.
Exactly. And just to keep things super interesting, we'll sprinkle in some real-world magic from Progress3.pdf. Think of it as a little sneak peek into how coding is being used in places you might not expect.
Indeed. Because ultimately, it's about equipping you with a mental framework, not just regurgitating facts and figures.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Progress2.pdf starts, as many coding books do, with the basics, installing Python. And guess what? Python is actually named after Monty Python.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah. It even mentions that IDLE, the platform where you write your first lines of code, is a playful nod to Eric Idle from Monty Python. Suddenly, Python seems a lot more approachable.
Definitely. It's always good to have a little fun with coding, right?
Absolutely. It just makes it more human. And speaking of human, Progress2.pdf emphasizes that IDLE is like a programmer's playground. It's perfect for those late-night coding sessions where you're just messing around with ideas, just trying things out.
It's like a digital scratch pad, right?
Yeah.
You can jot down some code, test it out, see the results instantly.
Exactly. And the book even walks you through creating that timeless classic, the Hello World program, your official initiation into the coding universe.
Right. That's like the first thing you do, right? Hello, world.
Exactly. Now, remember those comments you'd scribble in the margins of your notes back in school?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, Progress2.pdf introduces comments in code, which are basically like leaving messages to your future self or, to other developers who might stumble upon your code.
Which is so key because sometimes you look back at your code from like a few months ago and you're like, what in the world was I thinking?
Oh, all the time. I can't even tell you. A well-placed comment would have saved me hours of frustration.
Right. It's like leaving breadcrumbs to help you retrace your steps.
Totally, totally. Speaking of steps, let's talk about those coding essentials. Constants and variables. Progress2.pdf explains how constants are like the unchanging laws of the universe. They always stay the same. Variables, on the other hand, are more like those handy containers that hold pieces of information.
Like labeled boxes, You
Yeah.
can put different things inside, numbers, words, whatever you need. And the label helps you keep track of what each box contains.
And then there are operators, which are like your trusty tools for working with those variables: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, the usual suspects.
It's like having a super-powered calculator at your fingertips.
Totally. And Progress2.pdf goes into this one operator called modulo, which might sound kind of intimidating, but it's actually pretty simple.
Yeah, modulo just gives you the remainder after a division, right?
Exactly. And you might be thinking, okay, why do I care about remainders? But it's actually super useful in programming. Like if you want to check if a number is even or odd.
Right, which is a classic programming problem.
It is. And that brings us to conditional statements. Remember those flowcharts from school? The ones with all the if this, then that branches?
Yeah, I remember those.
Well, that's basically what Progress2.pdf is unpacking here. It's about giving your code the power to make decisions based on certain conditions.
So it's like having a conversation with your computer, right?
Mhm.
If this condition is true, then do this, else do something else.
Exactly. And the book uses the classic example of identifying even and odd numbers to illustrate this. Again, it's not just about memorizing code, it's about understanding that underlying logic.
Exactly, and that's what's so cool about programming. It's all about logic and problem solving.
Totally. Now let's move on to something that sounds a bit more, I don't know, fantastical: data structures.
Okay, yeah. This is where it gets interesting.
Progress2.pdf covers lists, tuples, and dictionaries, which might sound like characters from a fantasy novel.
Right, like something out of Tolkien, haha.
Totally. But they're actually incredibly useful for organizing data in your code. Like imagine trying to keep track of 1,000 items without any structure.
Oh, it'd be chaos.
Total chaos. So lists are like those numbered lists you make where each item has a specific place. Tuples are similar, but they're more like those sealed containers. Once you put something in, you can't change it.
And dictionaries are like those address books where you have names paired with phone numbers.
Exactly. In programming, Dictionaries let you associate keys with values, making it super easy to store and retrieve data.
They're like your organizational superheroes.
They really are essential for any aspiring coder, and progress2.pdf shows you exactly how to use them effectively.
And it also dives into loops, right? Which are crucial for automating repetitive tasks.
It's all about teaching your computer to do the tedious work for you. There are for loops, which are perfect when you know exactly how many times you want to repeat something. And then you've got your while loops, which are your go-to when you need to repeat a task until a certain condition is met.
And both types of loops are super powerful for working with data, especially when you're dealing with large data sets.
Speaking of data, let's not forget about strings, those sequences of characters that represent text. Like words, sentences, paragraphs. Progress2.pdf dives into all the cool things you can do with strings, like changing case, splitting them up, even replacing characters.
It's like having a text editor built right into your code.
Right. Like, remember those annoying all else APS messages you sometimes get?
Oh yeah, the worst.
With code, you can fix that with a single line. It's pretty awesome.
And then there are functions, which are like reusable blocks of code that perform specific tasks, right?
Exactly. Progress2.pdf does a great job of explaining how functions can save you from writing the same code over and over again. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Absolutely.
Think of functions like specialized tools in a toolbox. You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw, right?
Right. You need the right tool for the job.
And that's what functions allow you to do, create the right tool for each coding task. Progress2.pdf even shows you how to define functions with parameters, which are like customizable settings that let you tailor the function's behavior.
It's like having a Swiss Army knife of coding tools.
Yes. And to really demonstrate the power of functions, the book walks you through building a simple game of Hangman.
Oh, nice. That's a fun one.
Right. Instant coding cred. Now imagine you're building a massive Lego structure. You wouldn't just pile all the bricks together, right?
Definitely not. That would be a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. You would organize them into smaller, more manageable chunks. And that's where modules come in, as progress2.pdf explains.
Okay, so modules are like containers for your code.
Precisely. They let you break down complex programs into smaller, more manageable files. This not only makes your code easier to understand, but it also makes it easier to reuse and share.
Which is so important, especially when you're working on larger projects with a team.
Absolutely. Think of it this way. Python has this huge library of built-in modules that are just ready and waiting for you to plug into your code. Need to work with files, there's a module for that. Want to build a web application, there's a module for that too.
It's like having a team of expert coders ready to assist you with any task.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the more, I'd say, advanced but also incredibly powerful concepts in programming: object-oriented programming.
OOP. Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
It can seem a bit intimidating at first, but progress2.pdf breaks it down in a way that's actually pretty easy to understand. Essentially, it's about organizing your code in a way that just makes sense, grouping related data and actions together. Like, think of building with Legos, where each block has a specific purpose.
Right, and those blocks fit together to create something amazing.
Exactly.
So with OP, it's all about classes and objects. Think of a class as like a blueprint or a template for creating objects.
Okay, so far so good.
Each object then becomes its own little unique instance of that class. And each one has its own data and actions that it can perform.
It's like using a cookie cutter.
Right. Yes. Exactly like that.
You have the cookie cutter itself, that's like the class, and then you can use it to make a bunch of different cookies.
Right. And each cookie is a unique object with its own little quirks. Like maybe some have more sprinkles than others.
Exactly. I love that analogy. That makes total sense. So progress2.pdf really emphasizes this concept of inheritance in OOP, which basically means you can create a new class that inherits all the characteristics of an existing class, but it can also add its own unique features.
So you could have like a bird class.
Right.
And then you could create a penguin class that inherits from bird.
Oh, I see, I see.
But the penguin class wouldn't need to be taught how to fly because it inherits all those bird-like characteristics.
That's so cool. So OOP is all about working smarter, not harder. I like that.
Right. It's about efficiency.
Okay, so let's switch gears for a second and talk about the command line, which can sound kind of intimidating, but progress2.pdf gives us a little taste of this super powerful interface. It's basically like having a direct line to your computer's control center.
Yeah, it's like those secret commands you see people typing into a computer in a movie. to access all the hidden features.
Exactly, like you suddenly become this power user.
It's not as scary as it sounds, though. The book walks us through some of the essential commands, like ls, which lets you see what's inside a folder, or cd, which lets you navigate between different folders.
So it's about mastering those basic commands to unlock the command line's true potential.
Exactly. And once you've got those down, you can even start automating tasks by writing scripts, which is basically just a set of instructions that you write for the computer to follow.
Automation's like a superpower, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It can save you so much time and effort in the long run.
Now, remember those regular expressions we talked about earlier?
The supercharged search queries?
Yes, those. Well, progress2.pdf goes even deeper into that world, showing us how to use regular expressions, or regex for short, to find and manipulate text.
So it's even more powerful than we initially thought.
Right. Like, imagine needing to find every single email address in a massive document. Regex can do that in a flash.
Wow, that's impressive.
It really is a powerful tool once you get the hang of it.
Okay, so shifting gears again, let's talk about data. Progress2.pdf gives us a glimpse into the world of databases and SQL, which is the language you use to communicate with these massive collections of information.
Databases are like those giant warehouses you see in movies, right? Just rows and rows of data.
Yes, exactly. And SQL is the key that unlocks all that data. It lets you ask very specific questions and pull out exactly what you need.
So if you were building an online store, you'd need a database to keep track of all your products, your customers, orders, all of that.
Right, and SQL would let you manage all of that information efficiently.
It's like having a personal assistant who can instantly retrieve any piece of information from that giant warehouse of data.
And progress2.pdf does a great job of breaking down some of the basic SQL commands like select, from, where those are your building blocks for querying databases.
Okay, so it's like learning a new language, but this language lets you talk to databases.
Precisely.
This is awesome. Okay, get ready for some serious brain food because we're about to dive into the world of algorithms and data structures.
Here we go. The heart of computer science.
Right, this is like the foundation of everything. Algorithms and data structures are like opening up the hood of a car and finally getting to see all those intricate parts that make it go,
Yeah, totally. You've got your engine, your transmission. Each one's critical.
And they all work together. So progress2.pdf actually does a really good job of like breaking down these complex concepts into, manageable pieces, right?
Absolutely. Like, it covers those fundamental algorithms like searching and sorting, which honestly, we use every single day without even realizing it. Like, when you're looking for a contact on your phone.
Oh, yeah. Or alphabetizing a list.
Exactly. All driven by algorithms.
So it's basically like having a set of instructions for solving a very specific problem, which could be anything, right? Like finding the quickest route to a destination, or even organizing a massive library. Precisely. And the book pairs those algorithms with data structures, which are kind of like those organizational tools that, we use in real life to manage information.
So it's all connected.
Exactly. Like arrays, linked lists, stacks, queues. They all have their own, strengths and weaknesses. It just depends on what you're trying to do.
This is so cool. But you know what? Enough theory, right? Progress2.pdf also talks about how important it is to write clean, maintainable code that's actually ready for the real world. It's like the difference between, building a house with a solid foundation versus just like slapping something together that might fall apart.
Yeah, it's like good coding hygiene, right?
Totally.
It's essential for like collaborating with others and honestly just for maintaining your own sanity. Because if you look back at your code and it's a mess, you're gonna be like, what was I thinking? Exactly. It's like writing a clear and concise essay, Good grammar, proper punctuation makes it so much easier to read and understand.
Absolutely. And speaking of making things easier, the book also gets into best practices for testing your code, which is basically making sure your creation can actually withstand the elements, before you release it into the wild.
So it's like quality control.
Exactly. And then there's logging, which is like keeping a detailed journal of your code's activity. It can be a lifesaver when you're trying to figure out what went wrong.
It's like having a black box recorder, but for your code.
Exactly.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so we've talked about the technical stuff, but progress2.pdf also reminds us that, working effectively with other programmers is crucial, especially nowadays when, most projects involve collaboration.
All right, you're rarely coding in isolation these days. So that means, communication is key.
Oh, absolutely. And respecting different coding styles.
Yes. because everyone has their own little quirks and preferences.
Totally. And finally, Progr2.pdf wraps up with some seriously practical advice on how to actually launch a career in the tech world. It's like having a roadmap, right?
It is.
Yeah,
Because, let's be real, navigating the tech job market can be a little daunting at times.
totally. So the book covers a lot of ground, like choosing a specific path. Maybe you want to do web development or data science, and then like building your portfolio, acing those interviews.
Yeah, it's a whole process.
It is. But remember, the journey doesn't stop there, right? Like Progr2.pdf really emphasizes how important continuous learning is in the tech world.
Oh, absolutely. Things are changing all the time.
Constantly. So it's all about, being open to new technologies, experimenting with new languages, and just like never losing that curiosity. Which actually brings us to Progra3.pdf, which takes a fascinating look at how software is transforming the world of mining. Which isn't really where you'd expect to find cutting-edge code.
Not at all. Like, when I think of mining, I think of, like, pickaxes and hard hats.
Right. But Progra3.pdf reveals just how crucial software is in modern mining operations.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
We're talking everything from like geological modeling to resource estimation to even mine planning and production scheduling.
Yeah, it's all done with software these days. Like, they create these incredibly detailed 3D models of ore
It's
deposits.
like having X-ray vision.
It really is. And it allows mining companies to, see what's beneath the surface and make informed decisions about, like, where to mine and how to extract resources in the most efficient and safe way possible.
So it's not just about profit, it's about sustainability and environmental responsibility too.
Exactly. And the crazy thing is that these applications often use those same core computer science concepts that we talked about earlier, like algorithms and data structures.
It just goes to show you that programming is so much more than just building websites or apps. It's a fundamental tool for solving complex problems, like across all sorts of industries.
Absolutely. And it highlights just how important domain knowledge is. Because even if you're the most brilliant coder in the world, if you don't understand the specific challenges of a particular industry, you're not going to be as effective.
That's a really good point. So if you're thinking about a career in programming, it's definitely worth doing your research and finding an industry that really speaks to your interests.
Yeah. Because honestly, you can achieve some pretty amazing things with code. It's really remarkable.
It is. And speaking of remarkable, one key takeaway from both Progra2.pdf and Progra3.pdf is the importance of choosing the right tools for the job.
It's like you wouldn't use a wrench to hammer in a nail.
Right.
Having the right tools can make all the difference.
100%. And that could be anything from like a powerful IDE for writing your code to a specialized software package for a particular industry.
And as you continue your coding journey, don't be afraid to experiment with those different tools, explore new technologies, and just keep challenging yourself to learn and grow.
So well said. Because the world of programming is constantly evolving, there's always something new to discover. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one writing the next Progra book, right?
Sharing your knowledge with the world.
Exactly. Until then, keep coding, keep exploring, and never lose that passion for technology.